We're on. Maxine, do your
We're
intros.
on, Malcolm. Hi, Courtney. Hi,
Courtney.
Malcolm.
Hi,
Welcome,
Malcolm.
welcome to Courtney on Health. That's Courtney who should be saying welcome to Courtney on Health. But anyway, so I'm gonna kind of recite something here. It seems to be my MO in many shows that I do. I'll begin my diet as soon as I'm able, pushing myself away from the table as soon as the banana bread I baked last night has been depleted to nary a bite. Then I'll eat salads and green beans and stuff. Doing without sugar will not be so tough. Tomorrow, I'll begin tomorrow. I vow tomorrow works out so much better than now. That was two stanzas from a poem by Judy Dykstra Brown's blog on dieting. She does this diet blog and she does these poems, and I just happened to catch that, so I thought it was cute. Anyway, so it's like what watch what you eat. Stay away from candy, cake, soda, processed foods. So I heard like keto, DASH, Weight Watchers are good, and intermittent fasting is a new craze.
Yeah.
I remember when the Atkins diet was the fad back in the day. It didn't seem to help Dr. Atkins in the end, though. So
No,
how do
it did
we?
not.
No,
No.
it didn't bode well. So how do we muddle through all the various diets being pushed or prescribed to keep us healthy and well? So I'm going to turn it over to
Let me add
Courtney to
one
give us
thing
some
before we
insight.
start on the diet. Two words, a word that you shouldn't use on a diet is never. It's not, I'm never going to eat this. I'm never going to eat that. Like, I'm never going to eat candy. I'm never going to eat ice cream. Never is a very long time. Every
Yeah,
once
I
in a
can
while.
top that.
Yeah.
Never use the word diet at all.
Right.
And
Okay.
embrace lifestyle, which we're going to talk about today. But I'm being half funny because they're all of these are called something diet, right? So
Right. So anyway, there's a maze of diets, and we get barraged with social media, television, books. Yes, people do still look at books. So what should we be looking for in a good diet plan, and what do you suggest we start with?
yeah, well, I thought I would do a quick review of some of the best studied and the ones that are the trendiest right now, and kind of give everybody some options. I feel like it ends up being this quote unquote diet war, like which one is best. And the reality is it's best if it works for you, it fits your budget, and it improves your health, and it's helping you meet your goals. So there's a wide variety of diets, as you said. So, but at the top of the list, US News puts out a list every year about best overall diet, best for weight loss, and a variety of different categories. There's an advisory board that looks at, what's the diet comprised of. So at the top of that list, consistently is something called the DASH diet, and it's tied for the number one spot with the Mediterranean diet. So have you guys heard of the DASH diet?
Yes, absolutely. That's the diet that I was told by the dietitian and my cardiologist to follow, Mediterranean and DASH. It seems to be cardiologists, think that's a really good place to
Yeah,
be.
for a variety. It's so certainly from an overall health perspective, they're the top of the first, a little background, and they've been around, they've been well studied. So we've got decades worth of data to look at people who follow these types of diets and say they work for the following reasons, and we do see clinical improvements. So the DASH diet stands for the Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension. That's the whole history of the DASH diet. But what they've learned since then is that not only is it helpful in reducing blood pressure, but it's helpful in overall health. So reduction in blood sugar level, reduction in stroke risk. So many reasons to follow it. So the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet are not necessarily identical diets. So the DASH diet really focuses quite heavily on just a reduction of protein sources, very heavy in produce, which, by the way, consistently all of these diets that have performed well and work for people are those diets that are mostly plant-based, have a less of an emphasis on particularly red meat. Just working backwards from there. So that is the crux of the DASH diet. Mediterranean diet has a little bit more of a push on olive oil, healthier oils. At the top of the Mediterranean pyramid, so to speak, the food pyramid would be things like red meat. So it de-emphasizes red meat. Great focus on legumes, on beans, on vegetables, on some fruit. And like I said, a very heavy push on the oils, those heavy, high in monounsaturated fat oils, in particular olive oil. So there's a lot of wiggle room in here in terms of flexibility, in terms of budget. But the reality is, for a lot of people, eating foods high in produce may present an issue because produce can be really high, just high in money, and it costs a lot of money. So, but consistently, these diets are great to follow, so they're important to mention. Flexitarian is a word that gets floated around. I feel like what I'm hearing is people think it's new, but it really isn't. The whole concept of a flexitarian diet, once again, is that there's a heavy push on plant-based foods. It happens to be tied for #1 with Weight Watchers in terms of a diet to follow if you want to lose weight. So most people say, wait, keto is not up there, and keto is actually much lower on the list. And the reason being is probably compliance, and people just can't stick with it. Flexitarian is much more forgiving, heavy push on plant-based foods. It's relatively easy to follow. It can be a little bit easier on the budget because it doesn't say you have to have certain very expensive produce. It basically gives you a wide berth of different types of produce that you can have, so you fit what's in the budget. So you shop for sales and things like that. It does require a lot of home cooking. So that might be a bit of a ramp for people who are not used to cooking meals at home. Maybe they're eating out or carrying in, as it is the case for right now. So that might be a little bit of a behavioral change that people just aren't used to right now. But again, big push on plant-based foods, but whole plant-based foods. So for example, if you're eating a mostly plant-based diet, but most of that plant-based food is packaged and processed, you really need to rethink which way you went in terms of consuming more plant-based foods. So still that underpinning of more, less processed stuff, more whole foods, the foods, not the store, and trying to gradually build yourself up. So those are at the top of the list for the healthiest overall diet and for weight loss. Weight Watchers, by the way, has been around for a very, very long time. So we do have a wealth of data to suggest its effectiveness. It's not for everybody, but I'm hoping people walk away from this session saying it's not one size fits all, right? We're all different. We like to eat relatively different ways, so you don't all have to eat the same way. The keto diet, I will say, even though it's ranked very low for overall health and surprisingly not very high for weight loss, for short-term weight loss, it's fairly effective. You guys may be familiar with it. It basically pushes you into something called ketosis. It's a very, very high fat diet. It's about 70 to 73% overall fat, very high. So it forces your body to use fat, stored and dietary fat, as opposed to its preferred fuel source, carbohydrate, as its source of energy throughout the day. But people who follow it, they're like disciples. They like it. It works for them. We've got some data that suggests that it's helpful in terms of managing blood glucose levels and for individuals with diabetes. But we're not seeing tremendous long-term data in terms of weight loss, the weight staying off. And the reason for that is probably, as I mentioned, it's just too hard to stick with long-term.
What about just a quick question on
sure.
that, because the Atkins also had a lot of meat and fats and cheeses. I mean, in terms of if you have different people have different underlying conditions, and
Sure.
you can have a heart issue, you can have diabetes, you can have obesity. I mean, but I just can't see from a perspective of a patient in the cardiac world, having a diet like that with the high fat in there and meat and cheeses, and I mean, so you would have to really look at each diet to see if it fits, if you have a medical condition, how that works as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely. And that's why we've all have options, right? So if you're working with a healthcare provider who's advised you, like, why don't you try the keto diet? It needs to be, it's a lot of work. It is not something to dabble in. It's a commitment because you really do, you need to urine check. You need to make sure that you're in a constant state of ketosis. You can float in and out of this diet, cycle through it, not every other day. But that makes it a little bit more appealing for certain individuals. But yeah, it does fly in the face of almost every health recommendation that we hear in terms of leaner protein options, less saturated fat, healthier fats, yes, but certainly not nibbling on bacon as a snack. But having said that, again, you got to weigh out your options. If you're somebody with poorly controlled diabetes, you're able to follow this diet, the keto diet, and get enough of the vitamins and minerals and antioxidants in the carbohydrates that you are consuming. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why it gets flagged as a negative, is that it's almost impossible to get that level of nutrients with a diet that low in carbohydrate. Even if they're, very unprocessed, carbohydrates. So that's one of the issues, but people need to weigh this out and see what works for them, as I said, for budget. But you will notice that a really big common denominator in almost all of these is that there needs to be a bigger push towards better quality protein, minimal amounts of red meat. That doesn't mean you never get a burger again or a steak. It's so, it's not this all or nothing situation. Right. It just means that it needs to be de-emphasized. And that's a really big hill for a lot of people to climb, to de-emphasize how much meat they're having. But there is a lot of flexibility. Yeah.
I think you have to really analyze why you're going on the diet. Are you going on the diet for health reasons? Because the doctor said you shouldn't have this type of food or that type of food, or you're going on it because you want to lose weight. I mean, I think I've been doing it. I've done it both ways. But an important thing, as you said in the beginning, it's lifestyle. No matter what diet you think works, unless you can live with it,
right.
That brings us.
The diet ain't no good.
That brings us to the psychological, behind what's the psychology behind dieting, and how do you deal with that so that you can get to the point where you find the diet that's right, or you just eat right? You said the word diet before, Courtney, was like kind of what you want to get rid of, like that somehow.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
It really, for everybody, lifestyle change, no matter what it is, requires a lot of goal setting. So the first step for a lot of people, like Malcolm mentioned, is what are your reasons behind why you want to improve your diet, and what are the outcomes you're looking for, and to start from there. The psychology has always been part of any behavior change, and that is some type of reward system, not food, that keeps you going and making it part of a habit, a healthy habit, that you just become a well-oiled machine after time. So for some individuals, they're well down the pathway of having great goals, they're committed, and it's a little bit easier. But for a lot of folks, this is why Weight Watchers have been so successful. They absolutely require the social support, the check-ins, the weigh-ins. People don't love weigh-ins, but more of that interaction. So it's that feedback. It's that endorphin like feedback and rush. And this feels good. I'm getting support, and the pat on the back. So many people require that. So folks need to really look at that if they're going to try any of these diets. Noom happens to be a bigger one, not a bigger one, a newer one right now. There really isn't a ton of data that shows its effectiveness or lack of effectiveness compared to other diets, but it's popular because it's all app-based. And for people who live on their phones and everything is generated through these, all of the tools that are available in the app, that might appeal to them. But there's nothing magical about the makeup of that diet. There really isn't. It's still mostly plant-based, fill up on volume foods, so foods that are lower in calories, nutrient dense, fill you up, but don't necessarily have a tremendous amount of calories. But conceptually, it seems new because it's got a new age sort of tech, element to it. Intermittent fasting has had a spotlight on it And again, I think it's a tool for people. You'll hear a lot of dietitians say, no, it's not. But you know what? You got to work with folks. It's not magical. You can override the system. So there are a couple of different ways to follow an intermittent fasting diet, but the most popular one is the 16-8. So you fast for 16 hours, and then you have an 8-hour window where you do eat. But if you're eating 4,000 calories in that 8-hour window, simply because you fasted for the other 16 hours, it doesn't evaporate into ether, right? The calories are going to get stored. So you can override the system in terms of, when you eat or what you're eating during that 8-hour window. But for some people, this works for them, mostly because they've shrunk down a window of time in which they can eat. So for some people, that clips out a significant number of calories, and a calorie deficit ultimately will lead to weight loss. There is some data to suggest that fasting state actually improves insulin resistance. And if you improve insulin resistance, whereby reducing insulin, you're actually going to perhaps burn more fat. So that's the mechanism behind why an intermittent fasting diet might be helpful. So I'm hoping that the point of all of this would be that there are some options out there, and it doesn't have to be one and done. You might need to sample a wide variety of different meal plans, and I like to call them meal plans, but whatever you choose, it needs to be something that you're not dabbling in for 3 weeks to squeeze yourself into a pair of skinny jeans. It needs to be something you're going to embrace for the rest of your life that works within your budget. And I'm hoping that one of our episodes together is going to be talking about eating well on budget and how to make it work. Because I think for a lot of people that ends up being a significant barrier to them. Because we can't all eat grass-fed beef and organic produce all the time.
I want to talk about fasting. I know that a while ago, when I was really into dieting, there were groups, number one, that would fast for a whole day. It's 6 days a week you can eat, 1 day a week you would fast. There was another group that would fast for a week, and the whole idea of it, they say when you fast, when you get into a starving state, and when you starve, literally, is when the body eats off of itself. It's not when you're hungry starving, but literally when you're starving, the body eats off itself. And supposedly when it eats off itself, it eats all your weakest organisms. It weaks survival of the fittest.
That's scary right there.
Yeah. But
I'd be scared about that for sure. I mean,
have you looked into that?
I'm in support of the intermittent fasting diet. I'm not in support of fasting for that long. Remember, keep in mind, your body's super smart, and it's designed, if you think about hunter-gatherer days, it's designed to protect us as much as possible. So yeah, the last thing it's going to dip into is your protein stores and your organs. So it's going to be carbohydrates, fat, and the push that the calories is going to go towards are going to be those fat calories because of that drop in insulin level. But I would never recommend going that long without food. And I do want to say, because it's important, I've got some clients who are childbearing years and are pregnant. So women need to approach the intermittent fasting with a little bit of caution, because there's a little bit of data coming out that it might not be the greatest meal plan for somebody who's trying to conceive, or certainly somebody who's pregnant or who's breastfeeding. Partly because of the amenorrhea, the loss of period that might occur while you might be fasting. So I would certainly talk to your healthcare provider, see if it's an option for you, but that's the one subset of individuals I would say proceed with caution with the intermittent fasting.
My mom had a diet plan for my family. This was it. Everything in moderation. And if you want to eat something fun, go ahead. It's like that was my growing up in Brooklyn. And my mom, she ate well, and she taught us to eat. I mean, God rest her soul, she lived to 101, and there's something behind that. They have all these blue zones in different parts of the world, and you go, what do these people eat? They do interviews of all these people, and it seems more Mediterranean diet than anything from what I've been hearing.
Guys, we could keep for another 2 hours.
Another 2 hours, because Courtney knows all this great stuff.
Right, but our time is up.
And then I won't go on, Malcolm, I promise. But back to your comment, Maxine, eating 80-20. Okay, and you hear this more often now, but I've been preaching this for forever. Eat well 80% of the time with a big push on vegetables, legumes, better cuts of meat. The 20% of the time that you want to have your treats, and I'll let you fill that in, it makes it much more, reasonable. So
I agree. I
Well,
definitely agree.
Well,
So,
I hate to tell you what I did for Valentine's Day for my wife.
don't, what?
I went over to
where we get, it's PG, man.
no, I went over to Trader Joe's and I was gonna buy flowers. And then right next to the flowers was all the candy and the sweets. And I just bought her a whole load of chocolate.
Well,
And that's
you
what
know,
we had last
Valentine's
night.
Day, though.
it's Valentine's Day. You
Right.
definitely get a pass on that for
Anyway,
sure.
on that note, happy post Valentine's Day, both of you.
Let me
guys.
just, okay, I'm gonna just do outro here so
Okay.
we can put some information out, all right, before we go. So
Yeah.
for information or to ask Courtney a question, we'd love to have questions sent or
Yeah.
anything you might think of about, your diet and fitness and health. So you can go to her Facebook page, Courtney on Health, right, Courtney? And
Absolutely.
you have Instagram, so it's at CLG Wellness.
Yep.
And if you want to look at past shows, go to malcolmpresents.com and the manyshadesofgreen.com. And you can tweet me or tweet us, and I'll get it out to people at TM Shades of Green.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you on Courtney on Health next time.
Next week.
Next time.
Stay well, everyone.
You too.
Stay
guys.
well.
Bye.
Bye.